Ivanka secrets revealed as Trump past haunts him. If you care about the truth, and I mean the real truth, not the sanitized version that gets fed to you on cable news, then you need to pay attention to what I'm about to walk you through tonight. Because what's happening right now in February 2026, with the release of 3.5 million pages of Epstein Files, is pulling back a curtain that a lot of very powerful people never wanted opened. And behind that curtain is a story that goes back decades. A story about teenage girls, about modeling agencies, about men with money and power who operated in plain sight. And right in the middle of all of it, you'll find the name Trump, not on the periphery, not as a casual acquaintance, right in the middle. Stay with me here because I need to take you back before I can take you forward. It's 1991. Donald Trump is 45 years old. He's not a politician yet. He's a real estate mogul, a tabloid fixture, and he's sitting at a judging table for something called the Look of the Year competition. It's run by an organization called Elite Model Management, founded by a man named John Casablancas. The contestants walking in front of Trump and the other judges that day are young women and girls. Some of them are as young as 14 years old. Now here's what you need to understand about John Casablancas. This was not a man with a spotless reputation. At the age of 42, Casablancas began a relationship with 14-year-old model Stephanie Seymour. According to The Guardian, that's a verified, documented fact. When he was 50, he married his third wife, a 17-year-old girl named Aline Wermelinger, who he'd met when she was still a schoolgirl competing in one of his contests. The Guardian published an obituary after his death in 2013 stating that Casablancas was, and I quote, frank about his personal preference for girls of only just legal age, what he called child women. Let me say that again, child women. That's the term the founder of Elite Model Management used. And two senior female executives at Elite reportedly begged Casablancas and another executive named Gerald Marie to stop sleeping with underage girls. You know what Gerald Marie's response was? He said, and this was reported by multiple outlets including the Huffington Post and New York Magazine, quote, "We are men. We have our needs." That's the world Donald Trump chose to immerse himself in. He hosted the Look of the Year competition at his Plaza Hotel. He appeared as a judge. He sponsored these events where girls as young as 14 were paraded in front of wealthy, powerful men. A 2020 Guardian investigation found that these competitions were used by Casablancas and others to engage in sexual relationships with vulnerable young models, some of whom were teenagers. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on notifications because what I'm about to tell you next is something that doesn't get talked about nearly enough, and you need to hear it. Now, knowing all of this about John Casablancas, knowing his documented history with underage girls, knowing the culture of exploitation at Elite Model Management, what did Donald Trump do? He signed his own daughter Ivanka to model for Elite when she was just 14 years old. Let that sink in for a moment. He took his 14-year-old daughter and placed her directly in the care of a man who had a documented pattern of pursuing relationships with teenage girls. Ivanka began appearing in fashion events and editorial shoots as a teenager. The New York Times described her showing up to an interview at age 15 wearing a floor-length see-through white dress. New York Magazine profiled her at 14, calling her a ravishing mini-babe. These are descriptions of a child, and she was operating in an industry run by men with well-documented patterns of predatory behavior toward minors. Here's where it gets even more disturbing. Think about the things Donald Trump has said publicly about his own daughter. On The View, he said, and this was on camera, "If Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her." On Wendy Williams' show, when asked what he had in common with Ivanka, Trump's first response was, "Well, I was going to say sex, but I can't relate that." He called her a piece of you-know-what on the Howard Stern show. He commented on her body repeatedly. He said she was voluptuous. He said she had the best body. When she was a toddler, he commented about what her legs would look like and what her chest would look like when she grew up. Now, I want to be very clear about something. I'm not making accusations here. I'm presenting documented on-the-record statements that Donald Trump made himself, on camera, in public. You can watch these clips. They exist. They're not deep fakes. They're not taken out of context. He said these things. And here's the thing that really gets me about this whole situation. In 2005, Trump went on the Howard Stern show and actually admitted to walking into the dressing rooms of beauty pageant contestants, some of them teenagers, while they were changing. His exact words were, "I'll go backstage before a show and everyone's getting dressed, and I'm allowed to go in because I'm the owner of the pageant." And then he said, they're standing there with no clothes, and so I sort of get away with things like that. He said that on national radio. He bragged about it, and former contestants backed up those claims. Tasha Dixon, who was Miss Arizona USA in 2001, told CBS that Trump just came strolling right in while contestants were changing. Multiple contestants from Miss Teen USA, the teen competition, made similar allegations. So when you put this timeline together, what do you see? A man who in the early 1990s was hosting modeling competitions with teenage girls alongside a man known for pursuing underage girls. A man who then launched his own modeling agency, Trump Model Management, in 1999. A man who bought beauty pageants featuring teenage contestants and admitted to walking into their dressing rooms. A man who placed his own 14-year-old daughter in the care of a known predator, and a man whose name appears over 3,000 times in the Jeffrey Epstein Files. This isn't about one incident. This is a pattern, and patterns matter. Now, this isn't just about the past. This is about right now. On January 30th, 2026, just 10 days ago, the Department of Justice released over 3 million additional pages of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein. Combined with earlier releases, that's roughly 3.5 million pages total, along with more than 2,000 videos and 180,000 images. This was mandated by the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which Congress passed with overwhelming bipartisan support in November 2025. The vote in the House was 427-1. The Senate passed it unanimously. Trump signed it into law, though multiple reports indicate he personally lobbied Republican members of Congress to try to stop the bill before the political pressure became too great. If you're finding this valuable, hit that like button right now because this story is about to get significantly more complicated. Now stay with me here because this distinction matters enormously. A search of the DOJ's Epstein website for Donald Trump yielded more than 1,800 hits. Trump's name appears over 3,000 times across the full body of released documents. Now, the DOJ was quick to point out that many of those references are news articles that Epstein shared with associates, commentary about Trump, that kind of thing. And that's true. Being mentioned in the files is not, by itself, evidence of wrongdoing. But here's what most people are missing. Among those documents was something CNN reported on that should have been front-page news everywhere. The FBI compiled a list in August 2025 of more than a dozen sexual assault allegations related to Donald Trump. These were compiled by officials in the FBI's New York field office, specifically from the Child Exploitation and Human Trafficking Task Force. One official wrote in an email explaining how the allegations were being organized, quote, "Yellow highlighting is for the salacious piece. Let me connect some dots here." The documents also revealed that federal prosecutors had collected evidence back in 2020 showing that Trump flew on Epstein's private plane multiple times in the 1990s. This directly contradicts Trump's own statement from 2024 when he said, quote, "I was never on Epstein's plane." That's not an ambiguous claim. He said never. The documents say otherwise. There's more. One FBI memo from an Epstein victim contained allegations that Ghislaine Maxwell once presented her to Trump at a party in New York and later made clear to Trump that she was available. Now, that same woman told federal investigators that, quote, "Nothing happened between her and Trump." But the fact that Maxwell was allegedly offering women to Trump at parties raises serious questions about the nature of that relationship. And here's why John Casablancas matters so much in all of this. Because Casablancas wasn't just Trump's friend, he was connected to the same web as Jeffrey Epstein. According to The Guardian, a lawsuit filed in 2019 alleged that in 1990, Casablancas sent a teenage model to what was described as her first casting call at a private residence on New York's Upper East Side, where she was instructed to meet a photographer who was later identified as Jeffrey Epstein. You see how these circles overlap? Casablancas, Epstein, Trump, modeling agencies, teenage girls, Manhattan parties. It's the same ecosystem. And it wasn't just elite. In 1999, Trump launched his own modeling agency, Trump Model Management. According to multiple investigations, including reports from Mother Jones and the Daily Beast, former models at Trump's agency described conditions that mirrored the exact same exploitation pipeline. Young women, many from Eastern Europe and South America, brought to the United States on questionable visa arrangements, crammed into overcrowded apartments, charged exorbitant fees for housing and expenses. Some of them were teenagers. The agency operated until 2017, when it quietly closed its doors shortly after Trump took office. Now think about that timeline. Trump spent the 1990s embedded in the world of Casablancas and elite. He launched his own agency following the same model. He bought beauty pageants. And all the while, Jeffrey Epstein was operating in the very same social circles, attending the same parties, moving through the same world of wealthy men and young women in Manhattan. Jean-Luc Brunel, who ran another modeling agency called MC2 and received at least $1 million from Epstein, was also part of this network. Brunel was later arrested on sex trafficking charges in France and died in his jail cell in 2022. This wasn't a series of coincidences. This was an industry, and Donald Trump was a central figure in it. Drop a comment right now. Tell me where you're watching from. I want to know how far this is reaching because this is one of the most important stories in modern American political history and it's not getting the coverage it deserves. Now, I need to tell you about something else that connects to all of this. Because the Trump family's relationship with the truth has always been complicated, and the way they've treated the women in their own family tells you something important. Ivanka's mother, Ivana Trump, died in July 2022 after suffering what was ruled an accidental fall down the stairs at her Manhattan apartment. She was 73 years old, and what happened after her death tells you everything you need to know about how the Trump family operates. Ivana was buried at the Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster, New Jersey, not in a proper cemetery, not in a memorial with the dignity befitting the mother of 3 of Donald Trump's children. She was buried in a small plot near the first tee of a golf course. Multiple news outlets, including NBC News, Vanity Fair, and The Washington Post, reported extensively on how this burial could potentially provide tax benefits for the Trump organization under New Jersey's cemetery tax code. Now, a Bloomberg tax analysis found that the golf club doesn't technically qualify for those exemptions as of now. But here's what's telling. ProPublica had previously reported that the Trump Family Trust had been filing as a tax-exempt cemetery company since at least 2016. And going back to 2007, NPR reported that Trump had been trying to establish some form of cemetery on that property for years, with proposals ranging from a personal mausoleum to a 1,000-grave commercial site to a 284-plot cemetery. The Daily Mail published photos showing the gravesite eventually becoming overgrown with weeds and shrubs. Think about that. The mother of your children buried at your golf course, and you can't even keep the weeds cleared. Now let me bring this full circle because there's a reason all of this is coming to the surface right now. On February 6, 2026, just 3 days ago, the DOJ wrote to all 535 members of Congress announcing that starting February 9th, which is today, lawmakers would be allowed to view unredacted Epstein files in a reading room at the Department of Justice. They can take notes but cannot bring electronic devices. Representative Thomas Massey has already asked the public to help him identify the most important redacted documents to review first. Representative Ro Khanna has specifically called for access to FBI witness interview memorandums where survivors named other men they were trafficked to. Here's why that matters. A January 2026 CNN poll found that only 6% of Americans, 6%, said they were satisfied with what the federal government had released so far. Nearly half of Republicans, 3/4 of independents, and 9 out of 10 Democrats said the government was withholding information. A separate poll found that 49% of Americans believe Trump is attempting to cover up Epstein's crimes. And meanwhile, Ivanka Trump has retreated from public life. She said she stepped away from politics because, and I quote, "There is a darkness to that world that I don't really want to welcome into mine." She called it a very dark, negative business. She said the main reason she's not going back to serve in her father's second term is because she knows the cost. Now think about that language. Darkness. Cost. What cost? What darkness? I'm not going to speculate about what she meant. She's entitled to her privacy, and I want to be clear that Ivanka Trump was a child during the period I've been discussing. She was not a perpetrator in any of this. She was a 14-year-old girl whose father placed her in the orbit of men with documented histories of exploiting teenage girls. But the question that hangs over all of this, the question that 3.5 million pages of Epstein documents are slowly forcing into the light, is this. What did Donald Trump know? What did he participate in? And why has he fought so hard to keep these files from public view? Let me leave you with 3 things tonight. First, the connections between Donald Trump, John Casablancas, and Jeffrey Epstein are not conspiracy theories. They are documented facts. Trump hosted events for Casablancas. Trump signed his teenage daughter to Casablancas' agency. Trump flew on Epstein's planes. These are things that are established in the public record. Second, the Epstein files are not finished revealing their secrets. As of today, members of Congress can begin reviewing unredacted documents. What they find in those files could reshape our understanding of what happened and who was